Wait. What's that? Let's run that again. All right. Yes. Zero. Endz. Welcome again to another installment. And this is what we call entitled The Book of Endz. Volume 1. Strong Black Woman and Mental Illness. Part 2. This is section 1 of a very short section of chapter 2 in regards to looking at this so-called myth, or actually not myth, but a reality that from the author herself, an author that wrote this, I guess, book for a PhD, Michelle R. Ofoto, of Alt, where she has researched for a PhD in regards to this so-called mental illness in inclines of strong Black women. or the correlation of the mental illness, which really is a mental illness from her own research. So in chapter 2, this is what you will be covering. This is a literature review. Obesity rates, the intersection of race and health beliefs, Black women and health beliefs, and Black women and obesity, pregnancy risk, diabetes, heart condition, and we'll probably go at dependent time into depression and anything emotional eating. This is the first section 1 of chapter 2. Okay. All right, so as I'm checking everything else, I do sound good after playing it. So let's get into it. Chapter 2, the literature review. And mind you, for those that is listening to this podcast or going back to this YouTube channel or whatever, always, if you miss anything, you could go back to replay of this for better understanding. So I will try to be as clear as possible for those who go back to the playback. Chapter 2, literature review. This review chronicles literature exploring the impact of strong Black women, message of Black women's health, beliefs, and practice. The review will first highlight literature and obesity in Black women, followed by exploration of documentation and involve race and health studies concerning depression, and then emotional eating are discussed. Finally, literature regarding the strong Black woman persona and known of intersection and physical image, health beliefs, depression, and emotional eating are discussed. The obesity rate. Obesity presents one of the greatest challenges of American healthcare. It is the second leading cause of preventable death in the U.S. and responsible for the much of the morbidity and disability seen in the overpopulation. While obesity rates in the U.S. have continued to climb steadily since the early 1970s, perhaps the most marked feature of the obesity epidemic is the growing racial and gender disparities seen in the population. Statistically, data gathered by Center of Disease Control demonstrates that the American between the ages 20 and 74 years old, obesity rates for white males, Black males, white females have increased somewhere between 14% and 17% for each cohort between 1976 and 2004, which is roughly 28 years. Yes. With all three groups reporting obesity prevalence in 2004 at almost the exact same level, between 31% and 31.5%. The data indicates and rates of obesity remains largely consistent for white men and Black men, and the prevalence of obesity is approximately equal for both cohorts of men, making it one of the few areas in which these two groups have achieved parity. However, it is quite a different situation when one compares the obesity rates for Black women versus those of white women, or those of Black women compared to Black men. Between 1976 and 2004, Black women demonstrate a 20% increase in obesity prevalence, a sustainable, faster acceleration in obesity rates increasing than seen for any other population. This is particularly disturbing when one considers that at the starting point of the data collected reports in 1976 to 1980, roughly 4 years, Black women reported obesity rate prevalence twice that seen for any other population. The last block of data collected by the CDC reveals that over half of the Black female population in America was 51.6% and clinically obese. and that's by Birkin Holmes, 2008, page 79. That is for the last 12 years, through the 70s up to the late 2000s. The black woman has doubled her obesity rate by nearly half, or over half now. So that was the rate up to 2008, and we're now 12 years of new studies. That means it must have went up another 10 to possibly 15%. And this is an estimation because we always got to add a little bit more, because now if things keep increasing by 14 points every 5 or 10 years, this is where we're at now. But that's just my guess. Don't take my word for it. In the efforts to arrive at some explanation for the significant growth in obesity prevalence among black women, Burks and Holman 2008 drew on the data and collecting through the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, which is called NHANES. I think NHANES. And the Behavioral Risk Factors Surveillance System, BRFSSS. That's what in short abbreviations. To try and access the incentives, economic, health related, and social culture, and could be contributed to the disproportionately high rates of obesity in this cohort. The research employed motivated the regression analysis to determine the relationship between BMI and obesity and the factors associated with the incentive categories. The research found that all other demographic variables, social, economic, physical demographics, equal or being equal black, are less likely than whites to perceive themselves as overweight. Only when individuals report BMI of 38, severely obese, or greater does this distinguish disappear with all cohort self-reporting and obese. Let me pause right here. If y'all really remember, a lot of, how can I say this? A lot of women got on certain content creators about the BMI. Now, my views on BMI, if you think about it, is yes, it is created and structured by other race of people that's not our race. In regards, what is the average weight of scale of how much mass weight your body can handle? And as y'all know, that it is somewhat not really, it's kind of flawed, because when we look at us and them, we're two different people. Which I had to agree with most people that don't really follow Eurocentric, what do you call it, in regards to data, in regards to what is fat and what is skinny. But for the sake of conversation, when we deal with the health of Western people, Western Americans / Black people, ADOS, besides everybody else, this BMI is actually more of a better scale in regards how much your blood could circulate with the amount of fat to muscle. And the reason why I'm saying this, and we gotta be honest, after the 60s, most Americans, especially us people, we were mostly not only in shape, but we never gained anything greater than or way more than each other. What I mean by this, most men are going to always weigh more than women, because men are a little bit more bigger, stronger, etc. Depending if they got more mass, and they probably put more of the weight than women, because obviously men has to deal with the environment. For the women, you should not never in your life weigh more than a man. If you notice, the average height for men today is roughly 5'10". I said usually they say it's 5'9", but it's roughly 5'10". And the average height for women is roughly 5'3" or 5'4". And with this height, we also had to put in factor that with the height, there was a certain weight for men and women. They said men that's under 5'10" or approach 5'10" weight no greater than 165 pounds. A woman weigh, and you must understand, ladies, 125 pounds. They said today the average weight for women that's roughly 5'3" or 5'4", 180. So she weighed more than her male counterpart. The most a man was supposed to see average weight now in the past roughly over 50 years, or I say almost 50 years now, was only 168 on the average. They said on the average. Some say it's a little bit more, but your opposite, your counterpart, weighs almost as more as you. So when we talk about the BMI right here, that was right here, it is really plays a factor of the obesity in general for Americans in totally, including us. And we should at least keep a certain index, especially if we're not putting in proper muscle in certain parts of our area, where not only is tone, but it's more visible, where you're mobile, you're in a good spot. But if you're just fat, you have problems. And a lot of women, when you look at the fat is all over the body, not only in the buttocks, but in the stomach areas. And we can go on. But, I could hold this time. But like I said, the BMI is very much a factor that our people got to really pay attention and try to keep in the middle, because we should not be, especially with women, you should not be way more than a man. Let's continue. And Burks and Holland also observed a gender racial disparity in weight self-perception between white women and black women. Also, well, actually, I'm not going to ask many. The research found that among white women with a normal BMI of 23, the risk that they will misclassify themselves as overweight is 40%. Conversely, there is a 30% chance that black women with a BMI of 28, very overweight, will classify themselves as being normal. See that? After accounting for demographic variables such as social economic status, occupation, living environments, and food price, this is from Berkeley Holman's 2008 report, that there was no clear evidence that the economic incentive accounting for difference in obesity prevalence for black women relatively to white women, black men or white men. Similar, there was no compelling evidence that health incentives as determined by educational levels and BMI health indicators relationships play a part in influencing difference in obesity rates, and identified potential influence is the relationship between social cultural incentive and cultural ideals of body image and weight acceptance, which may have an impact on black women because women may experience weaker economic and social incentives to avoid becoming obese than the seems for white women for the black or for the men. Black women were both more likely to report comfort with higher levels of overweight, though not obese. The BMI then were white women and were more likely to report themselves as underweight when they, in fact, maintain a BMI consistent with the public health norms. Specifically, the research discovers that marriage and labor market penalties associated with overweight and obesity appears to more directly impact white women than black women. The research conclude that the research conclude that while their analysis of the longitude data for black and white males and female yield some direct on the question of what roles varied incentives might play in obesity prevalence in the different populations, still the disparities between the obesity prevalence for black women compared to the other groups remain a puzzle. They added that their research led to focus in the question on behavioral choice and labor market issues. They specifically observed the black women and white women appearing to be internalizing different message about weight and desirability. And they reference research showing that magazines target white females, prioritize message of fitness and weight loss with an overall projection of a thin or slender body and idealized alternative image and message in Black women. Magazines have markedly fewer articles on exercise and weight loss and tend to focus more on strength and health. The difference is messaging and social culture significance and its potential impact on Black and white women health beliefs, body image, self esteem, and self identity have been the focus of a range of studies over the last decade. These messages have impact far beyond the media representation and both reflect and are reflected by social culture, structures, community standards, and values and personal beliefs. And in Burks and Helen 2008 characterized the potential impact of this type of internalizing and incentivizing by concluding that the racial difference has been seen both as a form of distance from white culture and its unrealistic feminine weight standards and as a lingering memory of racist, what they call categories depicting black female slaves as heavy, sexless, and deviant. Burke and Hollands, 2008, through analysis of the CDC obesity rate and their potential corresponds with economic health relating and social culture incentives. Strong suggests that one of the strongest relationships appears to exist for certain subculture incentives, specifically black women, may be more predisposed to overweight and obesity than white women, white men, or black men. As a result, the certain beliefs and perceptions relating to body image and identity. Given to that black women comfort and dual oppression of genders and race marginalization in a culture defined by white male dominance orientations. It is worldwide to explore the particular role of relationships of race and gender may play and shape and black women beliefs about themselves, their health, their bodies, and their roles as black women. In Seattle's 2006 study of black women exploring the intersection of race and gender and its reflect or effects of this women's identity determines that the intersection relationship was more central and predictive of their experience and perception than either their status as blacks or female alone. The ionic image of the strong black woman is potential or prominent in contemporary discussions of American black women experience and the way in which the expectation associated with the role may impact behavior that can lead to obesity, such as emotional overeating, and exploring in the coming pages. Intersection of race and health beliefs. Changing strengths of health beliefs, particularly in regards to infusing an individual with a motivation to modify certain behavior that might not be healthy for them, is often challenging under the best circumstance. Memos of Blocks and what they call Romanpian 2002 demonstrates that most people engage in selective process by choosing to hear what they want to hear. Doesn't that sound familiar? Well, a lot of women, they want to hear what they don't want to hear. That which confirms their entrenched opinion It is not impossible to change people's minds and behaviors when it comes to unhealthy behavioral practice, but as Menon et al. Research indicates, it is critical to tailor the message to an understanding of individual circumstance and to recognize that too much information directs at changing behaviors may have the effects of desensitizing the individual ability to this core personal health risk. Alarming and disproportionate prevalence of certain several health problems seen in America. Black populations is a source of both practical and theoretical concern. There are serious economic, social, and political implications arising from the high rates of disease and illness, and the racial disparities in good health measure further constitute a moral and ethical challenge to American society. The concept of John, what they call Hershnin or Henderson, was first postulated by Sherman James, a public health epidemiologist, who identified the syndrome while examining racial disparities in disease manifestation and health care usage among Black Americans. One of his subjects was an older Black man who shares his name with folk hero John Henry, a Black man who is mythologized for having defeated a steam power hammer in a competition, a legend which has that upon beating the machine, John Henry died with his hammer in his hand. In the case of James, real life John Henry, he was embodied of the self-made man, having been born of the son of a Black sharecropper with only a second grade education. He learned to read and write and emerged from the sharecrop system and owner of 75 acres of farmland by the time he was 40. In his 50s, James determined that John Henry, his last name was Martin, was suffering from several arthritis, hypertension, and peptic ulcers, and yet he kept soldiering on and keep his farm and family going. Putting the pieces of Martin's story together, James theorized that John Henryism, or heroism, as it came to call it, represents a distinct style of coping behavior related to health and other concerns that was particularly evidenced by Black American individuals exhibited by John Henryism tend to expend a great deal of effort and pursuing goals as way to cope with psychosocial and environmental challenges. Research had recently noted that John Henryism came in some instances producing beneficial health outcomes by for many who lack necessary resource. John Henryism actually appeared associated with higher rates of illness, depression, and myriad other negative social, emotional, and physical outcomes. Mm. An article issued by Duke University Medical Center notes research indicating that individuals with high levels of John Henryism cope by inadequate research have a much higher rates of health disorder because their continuous drives may lead them to ignoring health problems as they emerge as and to continue physical testing themselves at a time when their health is depicted or depleted. They may continue to work and to overtax themselves, feeling unable to take time to care their illness and perhaps lacking of support to do so and continue to try to push through their health. Problems that they actually exude them. This may explain that some research have prescribed as health endangered behaviors that have been identified as possible contributors to the greater number of health problems seen in black population than in whites and ones by John Harrison, Key to Understanding Coping, 2006. We're going to stop right here. Normally, this is going to probably be lengthy, and for the sake of the time, I will stop here. And let me keep a track note on this. That's interesting in regards to the theory of John Henryism, how the man that defeated the steam machine back in 1800s, but lost his life, because a lot of black people have the will and fought to keep striving and push regardless of the consequence. And this is what is the oral result for a lot of African Americans in America. One thing that's known that with the obesity problem with black women, that the weight issue will never lead them or skip them. How they deal with it and how they will correct this is only totally entirely up to them. I feel the solution in my part is not only you go check your doctor to know where you stand, which is always, a must for most black people. I know most black people like going to the doctor. But if you could do it, do it. If you make time, go ahead. But second that, if not, you could always go through the process of detoxing the system. I think I know some people, which I think I'll find some in the comment section. I'll put resource for those that's trying to go in a journey to really start detoxing the body. Then next you go and get yourself physical or mental counseling, and you move on from there. But if you're a woman right now of under the ages of, or over the age of 18 and 35, you should always put in play that your health is important. And maintain actual weight. If you never was big during high school, or you were big up to the point you were from the 8th grade, you should know that you are competing with other groups of women for a certain pool of men. And don't be fooled, ladies. When you hear men talking, I said they always like these women thick. 9 tenths of the time, dudes are either one thing, lying, or they actually broke. It's one or the other. And most dudes are lying, because if they had the money, like real money, if they had like over $250,000 or $1 million, you think they're gonna be having a fat woman on their arm? The only way you're gonna get to that if he got that while you and him were in a relationship from the start. But either that, you don't want to risk that, because, like I said, the more money a man makes, his options opens up more. And if you let yourself go and let your body go to waste where you just get fat, you put yourself at risk for a man to really mess around with other women. But that's not for the sake of this section of this reading. So I'd like to thank everybody for listening to this podcast /YouTube. Section 2 will be the next continue of chapter 2. Be on the lookout for that. Until next time, take care.